Dhamma greetings, friends. My name is Joe, and I'm a student of Bhante Candana. Bhante is currently a homeless monk, and he's not attached to any monastic organization. And he's traveling from places to places, country to country to spread the Dhamma. So if you do find his teachings and his videos helpful, please consider donating at the link below. And I hope you have a good day and hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
We have to be gentle with ourselves often to make this journey. We have to be patient with ourselves to make this journey a success. Not at some point in the future, but throughout. Throughout the day, throughout your breath, even. If you recall from one of the suttas we've covered on Maranasati, the contemplation on death, I don't recall which week it was, but it was a few months ago. We came across those two bhikkhus where Lord Buddha was asking from among a larger group of bhikkhus as to whether they practice contemplation on death. And these particular two bhikkhus, one said, yes, Bhante, I practice it in the form of a single morsel of food that I place in my mouth, and while I'm eating, while I'm chewing on it, I am contemplating, I am pondering, I am remembering, I am recalling, bringing to mind the teachings of Lord Buddha. So I'm not lost in the flavors, I'm not lost in the how terrible or bland or too spicy or too, well, delicious the food is, or whether I have enough food left in the bowl after I'm done with this. So even one morsel of food that I place in my mouth, that's sufficient enough for time for me to be contemplating death, because I could die before I even chew that morsel down, before I swallow that morsel down, rather. And the other bhikkhu says, whether from the beginning of the in-breath to the ending of that in-breath, or from the beginning of its exhalation to the ending of that exhalation, during each of those times, I am dwelling on, recalling, bringing to mind what I have retained in my heart from the teachings of the Tathagata. Whatever Dhamma I have come to think about, remember. What did Lord Buddha mean by that? What could that be? Or you might have been inspired by someone, some character, a story from the vast stories or similes used by Lord Buddha and the other, his Arya Savakas. This allows you to capture time through sati. Where you're no longer playing by the dictates of yesterday, nor by those of tomorrow. You are here with whatever is taking place. even if it's a hindrance, even if it's a nasty, very hard to get rid of fear, perplexity, confusion, doubt, even whatever it may be, if you could just add a drop or two of sati into that mixture and suddenly see, observe the doubt, observe the panic, observe the restlessness, observe the anger, observe what's happening to the body. Any one of these, whatever is the most pronounced, the most intense, inescapable phenomenon for you at that moment, instead of being pulled into its details, into what could this do to me in the future, or I need to demolish this, I need to wipe this thing out and obliterate it from my awareness, and so that I can come back and drop into state of peace. If we do the latter, we are not doing the practice. So the job is not to get rid of the restlessness, the panic, the fear, the doubt, whatever it may be. That would be missing the boat. But to see the thing in that moment, for that reason, so many times, Lord Buddha repeats this in the Book of the Ones. Mindfulness, awareness, full awareness, anchored upon the body, is itself the way to the deathless. He says again and again and again and again. Hundreds of suttas like that. And when Venerable Anuruddha was asked as to what was, if there is singular technique, but what were the methods that he used in order for him to be able to become an arahant after his struggles, he would always say, point back to the Satipatthana. Return back to the body. Because the body does not exist in the past, neither does it exist in the future. It exists in the present. For that reason, typically, the breath becomes the technique, or the motions of the body, the movements of the body. When extending a limb, Lord Buddha says, or when you bring the limb back, when you're flexing the arm, the leg, when you're turning your head, when you're leaning down, when you're reaching over somewhere to grab something. Do not reach for anything without sati. Do not open a door without sati. Do not go forward without sati. Do not return back without sati. Of course, I'm adding, you won't find it expressed like that in the suttas with those words, but Lord Buddha says when coming and going, he does so with complete mindfulness, with sati and with sampajanya, with clear, full awareness. That, in essence, is living while being firmly grounded upon the fact of death. And that's the only way that we can transcend it. Hence, Nibbana is also called the deathless. That's what I mentioned in the Book of the Ones. So many suttas, Lord Buddha says, mindfulness, sati, directed, anchored upon the body, is the way to the deathless. All those, he says, who have missed the practice of gazing, turning the sati binoculars, the telescope, the magnifying glass of sati upon the body, have missed their opportunity to taste the deathless. It's amazing how often he repeats it, to just nail it in. It's like a drill. Like he's doing it again and again and again and again. It's like learning the alphabet for the very, 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 very first time in your life. So today's sutta, the Sattasūriya Sutta. Satta means seven. Surya means sun. So it's the discourse of the suns. Seven suns, to be specific, comes from the book of the sevens, hence the number seven. 7 times the suns, basically. It's an unusual sutta, but once we start going through it, we will see how it's still talking about the essence of the teachings. And specifically, I would like your attention to be placed on the anicca aspect of things. Because here we're going to see the cosmic evolution, rather the de-evolution, the dissolution of huge cosmic bodies that come to change, that come to transform and to wither, decay, degenerate. When we are looking at something, when we're looking at a certain phenomenon, a principle, we usually look at superlative aspects of things, especially compared to us, or one capacity or more of ours compared to someone else's of a grander size, grander scale. Now, when we look at, so basically microcosm and macrocosm, smaller version, minuscule, micro versus macro. Usually when we talk about macro or the superlative, in this context, especially in the context of this sutta, we will be talking about giant astronomical bodies, the sun, the 7 suns. Now, it's an unusual sutta because Lord Buddha here is using Buddhist and pre-Buddhist cosmological certain givens or certain aspects of what was prevailing at that time. But as the case was with all of the principles that Lord Buddha had something to say about, of whatever he came, like such as the kamma, what does that mean? Kamma, the term Tathagata, what does that mean? Moksha or mukti or vimukti, what does that mean? So he completely changed these terms that were used at the time. So similarly, when we're looking at the cosmic bodies, which, especially in the Western world, for a long time, and even today, in some places, some people, they still look at them as unshakable things, unchanging things. So they're surprised when an astronomer today, just with the discoveries they make, comes across and comes over and says, well, you know, the sun will be destroyed in time. People don't want to believe that. So in this tradition, this Dhamma, there's room for science, because Lord Buddha even talks about in many places parallel universes. When he talks about Jambudvipa, which is the peninsula of India, or the Himalayan ranges, or the planet as such, the world as such, there's so many with the same name. When he says that Buddhas only appear in Jambudvipa, which is India. Well, when you look at cosmically, when you look at the Earth, how long it's been around, 4.6 billion years. And when we look at the time span as to what was the time frame between the appearance of one Buddha versus the other. So the math doesn't make sense. I used to wonder about that. But then when you look at it with an expanded worldview, and then you see, oh, wait a minute, he's talking about parallel universes, possibilities that you don't find anywhere else, other traditions. So in that sense, also, there are many principles of science that fit nicely. They're not the same, of course, but it does not negate many of the elements that science provides. That's what I'm trying to say. So in the context of change and impermanence, the transitoriness of even these macrocosmic bodies, here we're going to see Lord Buddha bringing it in all back to anicca, dukkha, anatta, the three characteristics of, or the sunyatas of existence. And what that means for us, the practitioner, that is crucial for us to always be, placing it in the crosshairs, just always checking, reverting back to and seeing, okay, this has to do with that, to improve our understanding of the Dhamma. Excuse me. So this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, from the Sattaka Nipata, which is the book of the sevens, and it is Sutta number 7.66. So AN 7.66. Sattasūriya Sutta, Discourse on the Seven Suns. Suns as in the star. I don't know why I pointed there. Here we go. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was living in Ambapali's mango orchard in the city of Vesali. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus and said, "Bhikkhus?" "Yes, Bhante," the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One continued, "Bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them." From the very beginning, he already gives a heavy blow to the ideas that we have in our mind of solidity. The safety that we look for in things that we consider to be permanent. When we look deeper, however, into them, we see that they are anything but. Remember the four distortions of thinking, the vipallasas. To look at something that is impermanent and expecting there to be that thing itself to be somehow permanent. To look at something that is insubstantial, lacking an essential selfhood within it, something that is unchanging, but nevertheless expecting it to have an essence, unchanging essence. Similarly to something that is impermanent, expecting it to be permanent, something that is already lacking any beauty, but expecting it to be beautiful. Something that is painful, to expect it to be pleasant and not painful, therefore. To relate this back to us individually, I invite you to go back to your laboratory of living experiences, specifically in one particular area of your life, your relationships, especially the most significant ones, those involving love, affection, an object of desire, the person that you have finally found. Then what happens? Vipallasas come into action. They show up. You start looking at them, and all of a sudden they turn into a god or a goddess. They are now being sought to be turned into something permanent. Meanwhile, day to day, if you had a camera there and you put it on time-lapse photography and you start seeing it, in a sense, fast forwarded, you see how the body of this person is changing. Their behaviors are changing, their thinking is changing, their emotional states are changing. Nothing is reliable, apparently. But I thought this person has a self, has this thing. That's what I fell in love with. Why did he all of a sudden go ahead and change without sending me an email that this was coming up? Informed me, warned me, something. What is that? Distortions in the mind. Because at one point or another, we have told ourselves that no, this is an exception. There's another vipallasa. Distortion. Why is this an exception? Well, because it is. Because I wanted it to be. Because this is different than the others. Why? Isn't this conditioned? Isn't this also based on several factors coming in together to form this thing, this person, to form this relationship, to make it become something that, yes, it was never meant to be. So here already Lord Buddha laid it all out in the first couple of lines. Unreliable. And the final verdict on that is always given to every single one of us at the moment of death. Death itself is the stamp of approval of whatever Lord Buddha just said in the case of impermanency and unreliability, because we are constantly looking for stability. In health, well, I'm healthy. Well, for how long? So here we're going to go, Lord Buddha is not going to be talking about things, at least initially, that requires extra brain power to process. He's going to be talking about actual, at least in the cosmology department, where people had a firm belief in, such as Mount Meru, etc. And he's going to talk about them giving dimensions, again, based on the current or contemporary understanding of the universe at that time for people to relate to. So here we go. Bhikkhus, so he's now providing a backing of what he just said about things being impermanent. Therefore, we need to develop disenchantment and disentangle ourselves from that thing that we are pulled into, attracted to. Bhikkhus, Mount Sineru, sometimes called Mount Meru, Sumeru, etc. Mount Sineru, the highest peak, is 84,000 yojanas in length and 84,000 yojanas wide. Its roots reach down to 84,000 yojanas to the bottom of the ocean, and it rises 84,000 yojanas high from its base. So basically, it's a pyramid. Think of it as a pyramid. Now, some people argue that, well, this is a mythological thing, this does not exist. Could be. That's not the objective of this sutta. The objective of the sutta, we see it clearly from the very beginning in those 2 lines or 4 lines in this translation. But the essence of it is this solid thing that they perceived. Some people also say that this is Mount Kailash. Some people call it another a series of mountains, like the Himalayas or the Hindu Kush mountains, etc. Different opinions are there about this Mount Sineru. But basically, it is seen as a geocentric, like an axis mundi in Latin. The spine of the planet or this even galaxy, which has these lengths. By the way, yojana is about 9 to 11 kilometers, I believe. So let's go ahead with the next section. So here, Lord Buddha is going to delineate each of the 7s that the sutta is referring to in the 7 sons. So he is now going to elaborate on anicca, the unreliability of even the cosmos. Bhikkhus, after the passing of many years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when there is no more rainfall. And when it no longer rains, all things born from seeds and vegetation, such as medicinal plants, grasses, trees, and all forests, dry up and wither and are no more. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. So he's repeating here the first 2 lines. And therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this about all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. People are not attached to a planet. People are not attached as we are to the things that we like, the things that we associate with. So a planet is too big. So here I was mentioning about relationships. The body could be one, our relationship with the body. Ultimately, there must come a time in our development, if we're developing, where there needs to be an observable, demonstrative, factual presence of disenchantment, nibbida, towards that thing. That indicates maturity. That indicates, in fact, understanding of how things are. Because sooner or later, how long are you going to be convincing yourself to keep jumping from branch to branch, just like that monkey, from one thing to be delighted with, and then another, and then another, and then another? Sooner or later, if we're gaining some momentum in the department of wisdom, of discernment, we're going to say, okay, hold on. That holding on is nibbida, or sometimes also called disgust. Patigha also. Resistance. You're like, okay, hold on, stop. I don't want to fall into this trap. This just stinks. This is too much. I'm tired of this. What is really going on? That question itself indicates maturity and honesty. And Lord Buddha is saying that is what needs to be done. But he's looking at it from in this case, temporally, he just mentioned hundreds of thousands of years. Some suttas, they actually use millions of years. It really doesn't matter when you think of it. The passing of time matters. And the ultimate thing is not just whatever object he is referring to, like the plant life, in a minute, we're going to see how he's referring to the oceans drying up. But it's a good thing to also bear in mind this whole narrative that's been playing in the past couple of years of about the earth and the climate change, this and that. Climate change as if it just popped out of nowhere, which is just ridiculous because change has been happening all the time. Climate is a continuous, a progressive. It's not even a noun, it's a verb. It's an ongoing thing, which means it is transitory, which means it is changing, ing. Nothing to hold on to. The tree is not a thing, an object that's caught within certain frames and that's it, it's fixed. No, it's changing. The roots are changing, the branches are changing, the seasons, hello. So it's good to put things in, look at things in a certain light now, especially in the light of this sutta with 7 sons. Talk about light. Bhikkhus, after the lapse of many years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a second sun appears. Now, with this rising of a second sun, all streams, rivulets, and lakes dry up and wither and are no more. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. So here we have a second sun. Now, some might ask, well, you're saying that, or the Buddha is saying that these are the first sun and then the second, so we're talking about 2 suns, right? Scholars will disagree, and if you look at the suttas, especially given the disappearance of soft-tissued organisms like plants, and now we're talking about inorganic matter such as water, rivers, streams, they're drying out. Before they dry out, the soft tissue beings will disappear, and that's what he just said. So basically, could this be referring to the same sun that is now in its second stage? That would be highly likely in this case, because even if you change the pH level of water, if you have a river or a stream full of fish, you drop the pH level from somewhere, let's say 7, which is neutral, to where they can survive, to by even a fraction, suddenly certain amphibians, frogs, tadpoles, things like that, they will start dying. And then the bigger organisms, they will die too, simply because you played a little bit with the acidity of the water or added more acidity. But what happens if the sun got bigger? And that is what astronomers have all concluded unanimously, that this will be happening, but it will not be happening tomorrow. It's at least another billion years or so when this will really start taking shape. But within 5 million years time from the moment where it really gets initiated, when the sun is going through its, I think it's called the red giant phase, before it turns into a white dwarf, it's a star. So these are different stages that some stars go through. Before it turns into, it expands basically. So it will expand. This is not just Dhamma now, but I'm talking about it because Lord Buddha is talking about the sun. So, not a science class per se, but the sun within a few million years will expand, and it will be an exponential expansion, increase in size, where it will gulp Venus and Mercury and then reach the Earth in its massive size. So we're talking about the sun becoming so much bigger. But of course, as it's getting nearer and nearer, the Earth is losing its biomass, starting with the soft tissue like trees, plants, etc. Obviously, we've gone beyond the stage of there not being any snow or ice, or now we're seeing in the second section even streams and rivers or rivulets. We're going to get into the rivers section next. So think of it in those terms. Astronomical, okay, it does make sense because the Earth will be extremely hot. At this point, it's like really difficult to support life. It's getting worse and worse according to this development or dissolution of the sun. Bhikkhus, after the lapse of many more years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a third sun appears. And with the rising of this third sun, the great rivers such as the Ganges, Yamuna, Achiravati, Sarabhu, and Mahi, all dry up and wither away. In this way, these are major, major rivers. Lord Buddha, the Amazon, Mississippi, and the Nile were not part of their worldview at the time, obviously, so he could have used those, but they wouldn't know. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. Again, that same theme running through all of these phases of the sun, the destructive power of the sun. If the sun is able to change, and it is changing, if the climate is changing, if life that was there is no more on such a planet that is being destroyed, molecule, atom by atom, where does that leave all the wealth that people are running after? Where does that leave your bank account, your credit cards, the jewels that people cherish, the properties? What properties? I remember somebody had posted something and online after Prince Charles became King Charles recently, past few months ago. And he's talking about removing of poverty, this and that, from, homelessness at least in the UK. But somebody made a comment about just his crown, how much money it's worth. The diamonds and this and that, that would pretty much, they said, somebody actually did the math apparently, it's a few $1 billion worth, or £1 billion, a few billion. I don't know if this is true or not, but definitely hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, butchered, as those diamonds were stolen and brought to the UK, because you will not find either a gold mine or a diamond mine in all of the UK, okay? None. So where did they get all that? So anyhow, it's funny how, or it's sad rather, at the same time, that people have been killing for these gems that, the hardest stone and the hardest rock. When I used to work with jewelry, that's what they would always say. And obviously, it's the diamond is the hardest rock, it can cut everything else. But in this case, everything will be melted. Even the diamond, even the crown jewels. Impermanence, anicca. But where does the dukkha part come in? Remember the vipallasas, the contortions or the distortions in the mind that we have constantly? It is towards those things that are impermanent, and how tightly we latch on, grab onto these things that with our realization that, oh my, it is gone. This thing that I thought would never go away, it's gone. That itself inevitably, due to the fact that I was very tightly attached, upadana, grabbing onto, that itself is inevitable. Suffering, the dukkha, is inevitable. The disappointment is inevitable. And if you're carefully looking at this, those characteristics of existence are also in the hands of a wiser person, will turn into the keys, the gateway to Nibbana. Because you need to be disgusted. Fooled. You have to, the person feels, wait a minute, I've been had, I've been hoodwinked or deceived into believing something is there when it wasn't. So the wise person does not go back to try to grab a bigger bite of a bait to convince himself, no, this is going to be the one, in reference to, let's say, finding a mate or looking for, getting the bigger car, bigger house, bigger bank account, bigger. No, that's going to be, and you see that. It's foolishness, because the truth is the same, whether it's small or big. Here we're seeing a very big example. The sun. The sun itself is being thrown into a loop, and the planets are already in a terrible shape. Bhikkhus, after the lapse of many years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a fourth sun appears, and when a fourth sun arises, the great lakes from where the great rivers flow, such as Anuttatta, Sihapapata, Rathakara, Kannamunda, Kunala, Chadanta, and Mandakini, all dry up and wither away. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. We have our own things that we like to believe that they are stationary, that they don't move, that they don't change. I remember growing up, I used to try to remember lyrics to certain favorite songs, and usually poets would write lyrics about, as long as the stars will last in the sky, I will love you for that long of a time. Since the beginning of time, I don't know, years later when you read that, it's funny. It's infantile. It's stupid. Really stupid when you think about it. Who am I kidding? Well, obviously myself, if I keep reading that type of things, but human beings are very weird because we like to create something that isn't there, and we do our best to believe in those things. So we're both the jail warden and the prisoner. We are the one who's being tortured, and we are the torturer. Bhikkhus, after the lapse of many more years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a fifth sun arises. Now, when this fifth sun appears, the water in the great oceans recedes 100 yojanas, 200 yojanas, 300 yojanas, 500 yojanas, 600 yojanas, and even 700 yojanas. The water drops down to the height of nearly 7 palm trees. So if you think of a palm tree being about 60, so 600 feet, or even 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or even to a single palm tree's length. So about 60 feet of water left in the depths of the ocean. That also includes, think of the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean. The water recedes down to the height of 7 men put together. So it's getting less and less and less and less and less and less. Or even 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 man, fully grown man, or even half the height of a single man. It may drop down even to the knee depth of a man, to the ankle depth of a man. Thus, when the 5th sun appears, there would not be enough water in the ocean to even wet the toes up to the joints. If you can imagine that. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. Another aspect of, or another layer of seeing the disgusting or disenchanting aspect of life, again, the Putujjana is not going to see that. The ordinary, common, unlearned, uneducated, in the Dhamma person, type of a person, they won't see that. They're the ones who are going to go from one party to the next, from one bar to the next, or from one drug to the next, one relationship to the next. Those are the Putujjanas. But for another person who's reached, they just are no longer there anymore. It's starting to crack their whole, the roost, the maya, the illusion. They're seeing through the mirage, but they can't put their finger on it, as it were. So they're discovering these changing nature aspects of nature, and they're becoming disenchanted. So when you're disenchanted, and when you're disentangling from your attachments, what that also means is that you are seeing the emptiness of the thing that was promised. Here's where we also come across shunyata or sunyata in Pali. The empty nature of things. And no, shunyata was not, or sunyata was not a Mahayana concept. It never was originally from there. It was one of the key principles, teachings that Lord Buddha taught for 45 years. In fact, it is a key aspect of understanding what the deathless or amata dhatu really represents, nibbana represents. A person who's experienced nibbana, definitely, at least even the Sotapanna, they have absolutely touched upon this void, this empty, baseless aspect of things, conditionality. So disenchantment also will lead sooner or later to the experiencing of the sunya or sunyata aspect of what's really going on. This is the thing which is causing the person to, as they say in the vernacular, right? Letting go, dropping, things just dropping, falling away. I was mentioning to a student the other day, imagine just like a newborn baby when they cut the umbilical cord. And the baby goes home with the mom, and that thing will shrivel and wither, and slowly, that piece of the umbilical, slowly, because it's not getting any nutrients anymore, because it was the connecting rod of life support to the mom, no longer needed, because the baby is now eating through the mouth. So slowly, suddenly it drops off. The baby doesn't get a pair of scissors and cut it. It just drops off. So long as there's sati and sampajanya, meaning so long as there's sati and panya, wisdom, discernment, you're not lying to yourself anymore. Hence, you're becoming more mature. You're also seeing the void aspect, the empty aspect of things. It's not leading to hopelessness, by the way, in the sense that you become depressed. No, that's different. There's a freedom, there's a freeing aspect to disenchantment. That's why disenchantment, nibbida, leads to viraga, fading away of the passions, the lusting after things, including in time, even lusting after nibbana itself. And then there's tanhakkayo. Tanhakkayo, which means the craving is destroyed. They go hand in hand. Tanhakkayo, virago, nirodo. Nirodo means cessation. It's like those shackles drop off from you subtly. Whoop, like a bracelet that was choking your life out of you. It just like comes off. Bhikkhus, after the lapse of many years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a sixth sun rises. And when the sixth sun appears, this entire great earth, with even the peak of Mount Sineru, despite the 84,000, etc., yojanas height and depth, the king of mountains itself starts smoldering. The mountain, solid rock, fuming and is filled with smoke. Like the potter's kiln that gets smoldering hot and releases much smoke, as the pottery is placed inside to be cooked, while it gets filled up with smoke. Similarly, when the sixth sun appears, this entire great earth, with even the peak of Mount Sineru itself, starts smoldering, burning, fuming, and is filled with smoke. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this all about this about all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. It's interesting how before, when you increase the temperature of something, before it sets ablaze, when you get it close to a very hot temperature, when the fire is not touching it, but nevertheless the temperature is very, very intense, suddenly that thing itself, even though the fire itself, the visible fire, is not touching it, the heat itself will cause that thing to release smoke. It's interesting how Lord Buddha knew that. Something that people discovered much later. If you've ever seen pictures of an atomic explosion, those tests that they used to do, and they would have these cars, mock cars and things, or buildings, and when the nuclear bomb explodes, and there's this wave of radiation and heat coming. When I was a child, I used to see these black and white clips and videos on TV, and I would see suddenly the car would start to smoke. The buildings would start to smoke, even the trees. And then suddenly there's this, it sets ablaze. And then the fire comes. And I was like, why is that? Why is that happening? Before the fire reached it. Because the intensity of the heat. Just an interesting observation. For me, it is. 7, bhikkhus, after the lapse of many years, many hundreds of thousands of years, there comes a time when a seventh sun appears. And when the seventh sun arises, this entire great earth starts burning, along with the peak of Mount Sineru, the king of mountains itself, that catches fire as it starts burning and blazing, with its flames tossed by the winds, reaching up all the way to the world of Brahma. Now, when Mount Sineru blazes and burns, being destroyed by the scorching heat of those ravaging fires, the peaks of other mountains of 100 yojanas crumble and disintegrate as well, along with mountain peaks of 200 yojanas height, 300 yojanas, 400 yojanas, and 500 yojanas, all similarly crumble and are destroyed. Bhikkhus, when this great earth and Mount Sineru, the king of mountains, keeps burning and blazing with the ravaging fires, no ash or soot is seen. Just like when ghee or oil is burning and blazing, no ash or soot is to be witnessed. Similarly, this great earth and Mount Sineru, the king of mountains, will keep burning and blazing with the ravaging fires. In this way, bhikkhus, all things that are based on conditions are in themselves impermanent and unreliable. There is no point in looking for comfort or even stability in them. Therefore, bhikkhus, seeing this in all conditioned things, you should turn away by becoming disenchanted and disentangled from them, and thereby release yourselves from all of them. Bhikkhus, who besides those who have seen the truth could fathom or be convinced that this great earth and Mount Sineru, the king of all mountains, would one day be blazing and burning, crumbling down and getting destroyed? Imagine all of that. Even with the data that people are presented, they don't want to accept the fact that they're going to lose their house. They're going to lose their health, their wealth, their bodies, their knees. The spine will start to hurt this way, that way, the bones. There's no protection, ultimately. You can just protect, you can try to protect, and by creating the right conditions, but ultimate protection there isn't. And the test in all that, the proof in all that, is in the hospitals, in the nursing homes, in the morgues. Go, every single person dying there on the bed, any of the beds, or in the wheelchair, somewhere. It's a testimony of the fact that all these things that are being said are true. Nothing is permanent, even though schools, people you trust, keep telling you, or the media keep telling us the opposite. Especially because the mind is saying the opposite to this. That's why Lord Buddha calls human beings insane. Bhikkhus, long time ago, there was a teacher by the name of Sunitta, the founder of a religious order who was himself free from lust. He helped many to cross the ford. For Sunitta, bhikkhus had many hundreds of students, as he taught them to be born into the world of Brahma. That means they were practicing the jhana. And also the Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. Now, those who completely understood the dispensation taught by Sunitta and benefited from it, after death reappeared into a good state in the Brahma world. Meanwhile, some who did not understand fully the dispensation taught by Sunitta after death were reborn in the company of those who manipulate the creation of other devas. These are lower level Nimmanarati devas. Those are the ones who who were reborn in the company of those who manipulate. Paranimmita devas. These are the ones who enjoy how to mess around other devas' creations. When I say creations, we're not talking about toys or things. We're talking about worlds, populations, planets, entire civilizations. Yet others were born in the company of devas who enjoy creating, Nimmanarati. Some were born as devas in Tusita heaven. So we're going, by the way, lower, descending gradually from levels of heavenly realms downward. Tusita heaven. Some in the company of the Yama Devas. Some others were born in the company of the 33 gods with Sakka, king of the gods. Some with the company of the Devas of the 4 great kings. Still others, after death, were reborn as humans within the royal warrior class of Kshatriyas, or the Brahmins, or other wealthy and influential householder families. Even though he was teaching them Brahma Viharas, he saw that there's like a big, spectrum. Not everyone was being reborn in the Brahma realm. Many of them were being reborn into lesser and lesser planes of, albeit divine realms, but lesser planes of existence. And then it occurred to the teacher Sunetta, it is not suitable for me to be reborn in the same plane as my disciples after death. What if I were to develop loving kindness further? Then the teacher Sunetta practiced loving kindness as his object of meditation for 7 years. And by having developed loving kindness for 7 years, he did not come to this world system for 7 eons of cosmic expansion and contraction. These are half of the Mahakappa. Thus, during the periods of cosmic contraction, the big crunch they call it in physics, I think, astronomy, he was reborn as a radiantly glowing Deva. And during the eons of cosmic expansion, he was reborn in the empty Brahma paradise as the great Brahma god, Mahabrahma, becoming the great conqueror, the undefeated universal seer, the one who wields mighty power. So he's, the ruling Mahabrahma. So it's a position that beings are reborn into and die from. They don't, it's not, there's no immortality as such. Temporary position. After that long period was over, he reappeared as Sakka, ruler of the Devas. So obviously this is a step down from being a Mahabrahma. Ruler of the Devas 36 times over. And for many hundreds of times, he was reborn as the righteous, wheel-turning universal monarch who ruled by the Dhamma. That's called the Chakravartin. Conquering and winning over the hearts of countless peoples throughout the 4 directions without any bloodshed, and establishing peaceful stability in his entire domain. And that's how you would know that this person is a Chakravartin, ruling over entire vast regions with the banner or shield of the Dhamma. Without spilling any blood, his kingdom expands because he's ruling with virtue and morality. He's establishing those principles, and people start wanting to become part of that vastly growing, exponentially growing kingdom or empire. Further, he was endowed with the 7 treasures, as well as being the father of over 1,000 courageous sons, who were each a hero with valiant figures, ready to crush any marauding foreign armies. And they all lived by ruling over the earth righteously, without weapons as far as the boundaries of the ocean. However, bhikkhus, despite having such a long life, reigning for many years, Sunetta, the teacher, still was not released from birth, aging, and death, grieving, wailing, distress, torment, depression, and anguish. Therefore, I declare that he was still not liberated from suffering. I was mentioning it to a student recently how in the Book of the Ones of the Anguttara Nikaya, Lord Buddha talks about the single thing, the one single thing. He doesn't talk about one single thing, but in that sutta, he's highlighting one single thing. And there's several suttas, you can imagine. So in that particular sutta, he's speaking about excrement, feces, the dirty stuff in the gut, that comes out when you go to the bathroom. And he says, if your finger, if there's a little bit of that caught still in your fingernail, or on your hand somewhere, you didn't completely wash it off, it smells terrible. Even though the rest of the hand is washed. It's clean, except for that one part. Why did he say that? Because the bhikkhus he was teaching the Dhamma to, many of them were thinking about, well, once this life is over, I can be reborn as Brahma in a higher realm. Or at least, at the very, very, very least, I can become a Gandhabba or, live in a four great kings realm, divine kings, which is the next layer of, of the 31 realms. All of the realm, any exists, no matter how clean, how delightful, how happy, how enjoyable of a realm it is, celestial, heavenly, etc. To the person who's practicing the Dhamma proper, it should come across as a piece of poop still sticking around underneath your nail. It's that disgusting. So we do not practice to gain a higher rebirth somewhere so that there one day, something, a miracle could happen and we somehow become awakened. There is no such thing in the Dhamma. It's blasphemy, it's hypocrisy, it's nonsense, it's stupid, and it is not Dhamma. Absolutely not Dhamma. That is not the teaching of Lord Buddha. And that's what we're seeing here. Lord Buddha is saying, therefore, I declare that he was not liberated from suffering, despite all these abilities, despite the fact that he was reborn so many times as Sakka, as a Chakravartin, even as Mahabrahma himself. He was still suffering. Imagine that. You go to a Christian or Buddha, even Buddhists, even Hindus, Jews, Muslims, or anybody, and you say your God is actually suffering. How will they take that? They won't accept it, of course, because for them it is perfect. It's perfection. That's what they're striving so hard to get that visa, to go and sit right next to him or be one with him or, something. But they're suffering, Lord Buddha is saying. What are you talking about? Because you're looking for stability within those realms. No. They too are conditioned, Lord Buddha says. You have people for thousands of years that keep on lighting their sacred flame. In Zoroastrianism, they say that it's been burning for 3,000 plus years. There's a place because in immortal fire. Well, even the sun is going to dim out. What are you talking about? Ever seen a black hole in articles of it? They used to be stars, Now there's not even light could escape. What fire? Immortal fire. What are we talking about? So there needs to be maturity and understanding life and stop telling ourselves stories that continue to perpetuate our suffering. Lord Buddha says, stop that. Grow up. Get that pacifier out of your mouth and grow up. And what was the reason for this? That he was still not liberated from suffering? It was due to him not having deeply understood nor experienced four things. What for? He had not deeply understood nor experienced having the virtuous behavior of the noble ones. He had not deeply understood nor experienced the samadhi of the noble ones. He had not deeply understood nor experienced the wisdom of the noble ones. And he had not deeply understood nor experienced the liberation of the noble ones. All of which are found within the structure, the formula, the skeleton of the Noble Eightfold Path, by the way. But bhikkhus, now having awakened, the virtuous behavior of the noble ones has been deeply understood and experienced. By the way, here the reference is being made to Lord Buddha himself, because, and with his awakening, him revealing the Dhamma, he's not just talking about himself, he's talking about all those who have come to taste the Dhamma. The virtue is now going to repeat those 4 points, but in the context of it already being available. So the virtuous behavior in the world has been deeply understood and experienced, starting with, after Lord Buddha himself, of course, Anya Kondanya. He was the first. That's why he is the most senior among all the bhikkhus. The samadhi of the noble ones has been deeply understood and experienced. The wisdom of the noble ones has been deeply understood and experienced, and the liberation of the noble ones has been deeply understood and experienced. Craving for becoming has been pulled out from its roots. Destroyed is the doorway of re-becoming. Now there is no more rebirth and no more renewed existence anywhere. Having uttered these words, the Blessed One continued by saying, this comes in the form of a verse. The glorious Gautama, having awakened by himself, has deeply understood and experienced the Noble One's perfect liberation. Through virtuous behavior, samadhi, wisdom, and release. Thus, having directly understood and realized it by himself, the Blessed One declared the Dhamma to his bhikkhus, the teacher, the ender of suffering. The wise one, by having directly understood and seen it, has attained to the extinguishment that is Nibbana supreme, while showing to all the way to the ending of all suffering. So. We owe so much to the elders, to the mighty Theras who brought us, who kept these suttas, who took care of it. It's almost like a story that my grandmother used to tell me of this little girl, poor, impoverished orphan girl, somehow survives, and she goes and plants a seed somewhere, or finds a tiny little stemming plant somewhere in the middle of the field. There's a small mound, a hill. I don't remember if she plants it or if she finds it there. Let's say she plants it, but there's a drought, so she doesn't want that plant to die. She doesn't have anyone else in her life, so she says, I want to take care of you. So she goes walking maybe a kilometer, maybe 10, who knows, but she goes and there's a tiny little pond, muddy water, so she doesn't have anything to collect it in. So she lowers her head down and she starts putting, taking in as much of the water in her mouth, and she walks back with her mouth full with that muddy water. And she comes back and she starts allowing that water to spill and nourish that seed, that plant. And she does this again and again and again and again. And that seed, that plant, that sprouts, goes out and starts growing and growing and growing and growing. And the tree becomes a big tree, so big enough actually it gives such a huge shade that even the caravan leaders on their journey on the Silk Road would come and stop by there because it was huge. It was providing such a shade for the animals and for them. So they pay her money, this and that, because she's providing them with that comfort. So that image comes to mind of how the image of her carrying that water, that is the part that stuck with me the most. And that's what I see when the repetitions were being made of these suttas, to make sure that we get them. We are the recipients. of these wonderful suttas, these lovely, lovely teachings that Lord Buddha gave. Otherwise, they would have been gone. The other day I was thinking, wow, so much has been lost, but this much has been saved. It's amazing. Lord Buddha taught so much for so long, but even whatever he taught was very little from whatever he would have liked to share. But we have already plenty. What are we doing with that? So, is your suffering becoming less? And that is a wonderful way of assessing. Is there more meaning in your life? Are there more attachments in your life? Are you able to get up and walk away from things? Or do you feel more bogged down, almost like in a quicksand environment, glued to the ground like crazy glue, and you can't walk? Okay, if the glue is stuck to the soles of your shoes, wait a minute, I can loosen up my shoelaces and get out of there, can I? Well, what if I love those shoes? Oh, we have a problem. What if I love those socks? We have a problem. So many times we have a problem with even our ideas and interpretations of the Dhamma, how we look at life. So you don't have to look at a relationship or a commitment per se. The biggest ones are the intrinsic ones, the deeper ones, the almost non-tangible relationships. The fear of walking away from a difficult situation. Difficult because we're stuck, we're attached, and we're afraid. Even though we know that by walking away from that relationship, situation, a career, a habit, a negative, toxic habit, will give us freedom. And that takes us back to the real question, which is, do I want to be free? Do I want to see myself experiencing Nibbana? So many of us are afraid of that. You go and ask an addict when they're really having one of those breakdowns and they're really on their hands and knees crying, genuinely crying, shaking, and in pain, such tormenting pain. And then you wait and you find that moment and you have coherence and you see eye to eye and you say, do you really want to be free from this? And they say, honestly, no, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I don't want to. Why? Because of the unknown. Just like when you're sitting for 30 minutes, but you want to expand and see what's waiting for you there at minute number 34. It's unknown territory. What if I keep this precept, but I've always broken it? But you're asking me to take this precept in order to purify my mind. But I don't know what will happen. If I do keep that precept, what's going to happen? So the biggest obstacle is found nowhere else other than within us, within the mind. But the good news is that there is anicca. Even that changes. There was a time when there was no Dhamma in your life. Now there is. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions. There's two of you here, so you can ask here. Yes, Greg, go ahead.
So this sutta seems to be hitting pretty hard on thousands of years and which implies many rebirths and things. And there's another sutta that speaks about how many rebirths we've had so that our bones, if they pile up, would be higher than the highest mountain or something like that. And I'm not sure if it's the same sutta or a different one that speaks about everyone at some point has been our father and our son and our brother in different lives, in relationships that we've had. And then you were talking about, I'm not sure if it was in the sutta or you just brought it up, about relationships, how being impermanent. And it's talking about that all conditioned things, and that includes people, being impermanent, we should become disenchanted, disentangled, and release ourselves from all of them. So I'm wondering how, in the big picture, we should look at other people, because if they've been our father and our brother and our sons and daughters, and we're going to have, while we're reborn, continue to have relationships with them, and how we are treating them with kindness, loving kindness in this life, there seems to me a little bit of a disconnect between being loving and kind to other people, and we should become disenchanted and disentangled from things that are conditioned. So how do we treat other people in this life?
You're talking about a few things, but first thing that really screamed out loud was sunyata. Clearly, piles, huge pile of bones, and it's actually one person's in different lifetimes. It's a pretty scary thing. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. He was one time in the turn of the 19th century when he had shot these beautiful animals, these bison, and they build a pyramid, basically, a huge mound of them. And I think he stood on top or in front of with this, well, without sidetracking from your question, it is not about running away from relationships. That would be an extreme. The key thing here is to develop the practice so much that you no longer are fooling yourself. You're no longer are convincing of the story that you're watching on the screen in front of you. After you've come inside the movie theater and turned off the lights and hit the projection light and said, okay, action, let's watch this. And anybody who came close to that switch, the light switch, and you'd say, shh, go away, don't open the windows. I don't want to see the light. I am fine here in this story. Each of those bones represents that movie theater. So the person cannot be forced to see this. They themselves have to reach that sense of that place of maturity where they just have had it. They cannot fool themselves anymore. It becomes overwhelming. That's another word for revulsion. Revulsion. One of the things that we typically would do as bhikkhus, especially at the time of Lord Buddha, there are bhikkhus who do this still now, I'm glad to say, will go on Pindapad. And when they have the bowl, everything goes in there. Usually the rice and other things. And then you have also the sweet dishes that come. Sometimes actually they come together because the person had only enough stuff in the kitchen to prepare rice and maybe chutney, or they have a bag of chips, which you don't like, or hot sauce and rice. So they go together. Next person that is over there, they're going to give you maybe a lollipop, maybe something else. Well, you didn't walk around with bags. So everything would go inside. In those days, they didn't have packaging. So you would have banana, this, that, turnip, radish, curry, samosas, maybe something. So it becomes a jumble. Talk about becoming disgusted with food. Hence, we have that tradition. So similarly, the person starts to see patterns. So in order for you to be on this path, for any one of us, we need to recognize patterns, not just from our life, but when we gaze upon other people and their relationships. So the question then is not about not having relationships, because that is inevitable. You have to, because we're social beings, unless we choose to walk and go into a jungle, remote area. But guess what? Over there, you're going to have a relationship even with yourself. The trees, the birds, the owl. Why is this owl always there? Or the bird, there's a relationship. Part of the brain functions like that. So it is a matter then about the attachment we grab onto this, and usually it's the projections. It pertains to the projection of this person. That's why people end up coming to couples therapist sessions and say, I don't know what happened. Excuse me, I don't know what happened with him, but he changed. No kidding. Or she was much better than this. I don't know what happened. If he has the guts to say it. Usually they would say that in individual sections of the couples therapy, but they would never say that in front of her. She would say that. This is, time-tested fact. But despite the changes that are occurring, you can develop a deeper understanding and appreciation while being based on the disenchantment aspect of things. Why, though? How do you get to become disenchanted? Because you're seeing through the distortions I mentioned, the vipallasa. You are no longer looking at something that is intrinsically impermanent and somehow hoping for it to be permanent. Do you see the finer nuances of it? Is this?
Yeah, I think you're saying you can accept what's there without adding your story, that wanting it to be permanent or impermanent. For some people, you want to go away. I think that's what you're saying. Just take it's like hearing what there is to hear without making a story from it.
There's one aspect of it, absolutely. But then there is the crucial part of it, I think, also lies in the fact that we are terribly, terribly scared. Because you're investing in this relationship. There's a huge investment. You've said yeses, multiple yeses to a situation with the hope of something or some things. And you've said no, many, 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 many no's to other things. So that becomes a bundle of, powerful bundle of projected realities, where you're invested in it emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, you might say, financially, usually. This is in case of couples, let's say. But the moment you fall in love with someone, or you invest, quote unquote, emotionally with someone, you already opened up a big chunk of your heart to vulnerabilities, inevitable, such as the big, big, big fat fact of this person dying before I go. That's a big one. That no one, no member of a couple's relationship or whatever, really feels comfortable swallowing that pill without cringing a little bit, at least. So this then, if you're in a relationship, it then requires us, especially with the disenchantment, can I accept you given the fact that you are very temporary? That tomorrow you could change. I know that. And despite all my best intentions and efforts, I'm sorry, but I might change too. My legs might not work tomorrow. I'm sorry. I'll do my best. I'll work out. I'll do this. They might not. Or I might have a headache and I can't look at you with the same loving gaze as I normally do tomorrow. I don't know, but I'm going to do my best. Now, how will that person take that? Will they want me to fit a certain... Do you see the expectations that come along with these investments, that now we push further and we get into old age? That's why people use these terms very loosely, but they don't pause and really take the seriousness of it, because there are so many emotional ties being roots that we are sending with hoping despite all odds that he's going to stay a little bit longer. She's going, or I might go first. Please let me go first. I don't want to suffer the pain of losing you. But what happened with those 20 years, 10 years, 30 years we spent together? We were having so much fun. You're okay with those, but not when she's gone. So there are these, that's another story. But this is all happening in the mind of anyone who happens to be, well, the majority, Putujjana. Now, the mature person will come and see this, see the patterns, understand them. Yes, feel that sinking feeling in the heart, maybe become sad, anguish, cry, journal, maybe go to therapy, which are all fine. They're necessary, in fact, I would say. But then sit with it and just see what is happening. Wait a minute, this is only this life we're talking about. And let's listen to what Greg's example was all about. A planet full of skeletons, my skeleton. That means to say, every single one of those skeletons, well, at least let's presume it was only one relationship, because many times you would have in one lifetime several partners. This didn't work out, or you lost a wife or a husband, and then you want to give yourself another shot. You go and find another relationship. Guess what? He dies or she dies again, or something happens. Wow. There's another story where Lord Buddha is talking about each of our loved ones being a source of suffering. Well, especially because one person comes in and he had just lost one of his children. And Lord Buddha listens to him, and to console him, he says to teach him some Dhamma. But apparently this man was not ready to hear. He says, each of our children, each of one's children, are a source of much pain and sorrow and suffering and anguish. Person doesn't like it. He says, well, how could you say that? You're Gautama, you're good sir, master Gautama, you're supposed to be, come on, how could you say that? So he gets upset and he gets up and leaves and goes to one of the other contemporary teachers who didn't like, most of them never liked Lord Buddha, if not all the teachers, because he was their competition. So he goes to this other teacher and he says, do you believe this, Gautama person? He said that our children are the sources of our pain. Do you believe that? How could you? He said, yes, that's absolutely right, that what you're saying, this is unreasonable of him to say that. So long story short, the news gets all the way to King Pasenadi's court. Back then, King Pasenadi was not a student of Lord Buddha, but his wife was, the Queen Mallika was. She was an avid student of Lord Buddha's. So they're having breakfast, and King Pasenadi turns to Queen Mallika and says, do you believe your teacher? How could you say something like this? That each, a person's child is a source of their self. How could, they're a bundle of love, they're a source of joy, there's a source of happiness. How could he say that? I mean, and Queen Mallika says, listen, I'm not a witness of this being said by Lord Buddha, but if you're saying that he said it, I'm sure he had a reason to say that. Because Lord Buddha does not speak adhamma, he is the Dhamma. And King Pasenadi says, you're always backing him up, he's your teacher, he's never wrong. So that day he's excited, he really wants to know, so he gets on his chariot with his group of entourage, he goes to see Lord Buddha. And he does see him, and he sits down and he says, Bhante, I'm not going to beat around the bush, I'm here because I need to get clarification. And he said, what about, King? Maharaja? And he says, we heard at court that you said this, that a child is the source of a parent's pain and suffering. And here you can alternate the child. It could be a mate, it could be anything. Close, but meaningful in one's life. Without, saying yes or no, because he wants to get validation that, did you say that? Because he already has a conclusion set up in his mind. Oh, okay, so I knew it. But Lord Buddha approaches it differently, as he does normally, usually. And he says, do you have a favorite child, Maharaja? He says, yes, I have many children, but do you have a favorite one? He says, yes. And he smiles already. He's thinking of the one. And he says, who is it? And he says, oh, my daughter. And he gives the name. I forgot the name. And he says, oh, yes, my daughter. She's my everything. He says, she's your everything. Imagine she's riding her horse. She falls. Oh, no, okay, but come on. Let's not use those images. That's why. Imagine she falls, she breaks her ankle. Oh, he's physically now reacting. And he says, but wait a minute, King. What if she falls and dies? He says, please don't say that. But he says, let's say, I mean, she's not going to live forever. We know that. No one is. But what would happen to you when she dies? And he says, oh, Gautama, Master Gautama, I would be distraught. I would be gone. I would be destroyed. Would you call that suffering? He says. He asks him. He says, of course it's a heartbreaking, anguish-ridden suffering. He says, that's what I was saying to that man. He says, do you understand as to what was meant here by every child or every significant person in one's life being a source of suffering? In fact, I will even extend it to every significant thing in your life. What makes it significant? In this context, something that you're completely leaning into, you're merged in it, you're identified with it. That the possibility of this person exiting your life, the scene, is complete destruction of peace and happiness in life, life for you. So it's not a matter of everybody going and being alone, not having being in a relationship. No. For some, yes, because their level of disenchantment is really intense because it's become clear to them. The outline is very clear of the pattern. For those people, it's reached a point like it was for Siddhartha Gautama. He couldn't take it anymore. That's why he left, because he knew that this was no different than the countless other significant relationships he had in the past. That's why he said, no. The buck stops here, as they say. So that's how I would approach answering your question. It's not denying life. It's not denying what gives you meaning in life. But it is definitely about identifying patterns. And it doesn't have to be related with only relationships. It could be things that something less significant. It could be more mundane, such as possessions. I'm surprised that some people I know, family members I've known in the past, who would go and buy I know I'm mundane, right? Looking for buying the new car, the latest model of this car. And then they would get the car, and then 2 weeks later, you would see them going and hovering around the dealership, reading on new material. And every time I would see them, they would ask me, oh, have you heard the thing about this car? I was like, why? I thought you just bought one. Yeah, but that was 3 months ago. That person is refusing to see the disenchantment. Because I'm sure somewhere something's happening, the disappointment. That's why they want to go reach into the other. This is called pono bhavika, by the way, the desire. Nandiraga, bhinandini, tatra tatra. Here and there, they're always looking for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And that's what propaganda is all about. That's what advertising agencies thrive on. Hey, look over here, look over here, look over here. So, but you don't need the propaganda machine to do the trick because we didn't have that. Most of our lives, past lives, we did have, however, Mara's ambassadors with us all along, the six senses, the eyes, the nose, the ears, of course, the tongue, the body, and the mind. Memories for the mind, thoughts, tastes, flavors for the tongue, smells, fragrances for the nose, sounds, appealing, provocative, seductive sounds, seductive sights with lots and lots of intriguing, scintillating, attractive details that we linger upon even after the fact. The mind comes in, you remember that? Oh, we should have some more of that. That is the movie still playing. Instead of you going, you know what? I'm going to turn the light switch on, open the covers, open the drapes, and I've had it. That is not just a bhikkhu, proper bhikkhu, but anyone who has had enough. A lay person, lay woman, lay man, who've had enough. And that's what the Dhamma provides, the exit door out of the movie theater, because life is happening outside of this Maya in each and every moment in the present, because the movie is not taking place. We're making it. It's a make-believe. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Okay. Let us transfer some mass. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. May the Dhamma continue to send down its roots in you, as they say, and you take care of it, just like that young little girl with every drop of water as if it was like a diamond. She didn't want to waste because she was worried that the seed would need that to grow. Every moment of sati is like that. Every moment that you're present, you can never be present in the past. You can never be present in the future. You can only be present in the moment where you're able to hold the hand of sati. Going, coming back, opening the door, sitting down, getting up, eating, drinking, opening your eyes, closing them, turning over when you're asleep from side to side. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you and all your loved ones. Till next week. Sukhi Hotu.